Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're jumping right in to neutrally unpack the psychological and systemic mechanics behind the adult entertainment industry. And we're going to base this entirely on a really revealing first-hand interview given to BBC News by former adult actress Mia Khalifa. By looking closely at her specific experiences, we're going to map out exactly how this whole industry operates, from the very first recruitment pitch all the way out to its broader impacts on our culture. So let's dive right into this. The most compelling place to start is with a pretty simple question. How does someone actually end up in this world? We aren't talking about some stereotype or caricature here. We're looking at a young woman whose parents brought her to the US from Lebanon, who was raised in America, is clearly super smart, and graduated from a university in Texas with a history degree. How does a normal, educated young person looking for a job get drawn into the adult film industry? Well, to figure that out, we really have to look past the surface. That brings us to Section 1, the vulnerability trap. Let's look at the psychological roots here. This really brilliantly illustrates what is essentially a pipeline of insecurity, which acts as the main entry point. The interview highlights that low self-esteem, well, it doesn't discriminate based on your background. In her case, there was a childhood struggle with weight, and that led to this lingering feeling of never quite being worthy of male attention. Then came a really drastic physical change. She lost about 50 pounds in college, and to fix some leftover insecurities about her changing body, she ended up getting breast surgery. What followed was this sudden, massive influx of validation and attention from men. And right there, that is the trap. Because after experiencing that kind of validation for the very first time, she developed this desperate, driving fear of losing it. She felt like she just had to hold on to it, do what was expected of her, or else that newly found attention would literally just vanish. Moving on to Section 2, the illusion of glamour. This is all about the recruitment facade. Notice the stark contrast we have here. On one side, you have the illusion. When she was first approached on the street, it wasn't some blatant pitch for pornography. No, it was pitched as a highly respectable modeling gig. And the environment completely disarmed her. We're talking a gorgeous location in Miami, an immaculately clean studio, and normal family photos sitting right there on the office cubicles. But then, you look at the harsh reality on the other side. Behind that totally respectable facade, the people running the show viewed this unrepresented 21-year-old purely as a money machine. She had no legal representation, and honestly, what 21-year-old do you know who keeps a lawyer on retainer? Which leads us directly into Section 3, intimidation and exploitation, the incredibly harsh reality of being on set. So, the major turning point in her story involves a highly controversial scene where she was directed to wear an Islamic headscarf, a hijab. Notice the massive power imbalance here. She explicitly told the producers, "You guys are going to get me killed." And their response? They literally just laughed at her. They totally ignored the very real threat of physical violence just for the sake of their own profit and shock value. Now, you might be sitting there thinking, well, why didn't she just walk off the set? When asked that exact question, the interview provided this fascinating and honestly super relatable analogy. She asked the interviewer if they had ever felt too nervous to tell a waiter that their food order was wrong, right? We've all been there. Now, if you can feel that level of paralyzing social anxiety over a simple plate of food, just imagine the immense pressure, the intimidation, and the absolute fear of speaking out in a room full of older men who completely control your employment. It wasn't physical force keeping her there. It was the heavy, unspoken weight of pure intimidation. Okay, Section 4, the digital aftermath, the permanent impact of all this. The aftermath of this experience carries a devastatingly heavy toll. Even years later, looking totally poised and composed, our source described dealing with severe post-traumatic stress, especially when she's just out in public. The stares she gets create this really profound sense of shame and this pervasive paranoia that people can literally see right through her clothes. And perhaps the absolute most daunting mechanic of our digital age, these images are permanent. They are literally always just one single Google search away, and she has absolutely no legal right or ability to just expunge them from the internet. Let's look at Section 5, a systemic industry problem, how this spreads industry-wide. Because after she spoke out, her inbox was absolutely flooded with messages from other women, which quickly revealed that her experience was definitely not an isolated incident. These emails exposed a really dark systemic pipeline. We're talking stories of women being actively sex trafficked, forced into the industry against their will, or trapped by predatory contracts filled with dense legal jargon that they didn't even understand. This proves, without a doubt, that we are looking at an industry-wide mechanical failure in how vulnerable people are essentially used and discarded. Finally, Section 6, the pornification of culture, the broader societal impacts. This brings us to a really critical societal question that the interviewer posed. Is our culture being pornified? With younger and younger people being exposed to this highly manufactured, extreme content so early in their lives, is it materially changing the way men and women actually relate to each other out in the real world? According to the source, the answer to that is a resounding yes. Because porn addiction has become so incredibly prevalent, this type of media causes corrosive damage by setting completely impossible expectations. Men begin to expect the highly performative, totally scripted, and often physically unrealistic acts they see in these videos from the real women in their everyday lives. It completely distorts the baseline of what a normal, healthy relationship is actually supposed to look like. And that leaves us with this really profound final thought to reflect on. No one is going to do those extreme acts on a Wednesday night with the person they love. It is the ultimate stark disconnect between the manufactured content produced by an exploitative industry and the quiet, beautiful reality of genuine human connection. So it leaves us having to ask, does the media we consume simply shape our reality, or does it distort it beyond recognition? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.